Welcome to Disrupting Japan, straight talk from Japan's most successful entrepreneurs. I'm Tim Romero, and thanks for joining me. Today, we're going to talk about robots, specifically industrial robots. Now, Japan has been a global leader in robotics for decades, but in recent years, Japanese firms seem to be losing ground to the better-funded and better-publicized companies coming out of the U.S. and China. Well, today we're going to sit down with the founder of a company that is already starting to change that. Issei Takino founded Mujin with his co-founder Rosen Diankov, and they have developed a kind of android for industrial robots. That is to say, it's a generic operating system that works with almost any hardware and works far more effectively than anything else in the industry. Issei and I go into some of the details during the interview, but perhaps the clearest illustration of Mujin's success was a project they did for Chinese e-commerce giant JD. They developed the world's first fully automated logistics warehouse. It's a massive facility, but almost no humans work there. Robots unload the trucks, stock the shelves, pick the items for delivery, and then pack them and ship them out. It's hard to explain in an audio podcast, so check out the video. We've got a link at the site, and it's really amazing to watch. Issei and I also talk about how Japan and the West look at robots very differently, and how that might be holding America back. He also shares his experience and advice about founding and running a startup as a multinational team. And we talk about why these kinds of Japanese-foreign partnerships are going to become more common and more important in the coming years. But you know, Issei tells that story much better than I can. So let's get right to the interview. All right, so I'm sitting here with Issei Takino of Mujin, the maker of controllers for industrial robots. So thanks for sitting down with me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for inviting.
Well, I'm glad after all the technical difficulties that we're finally able to sit down and talk. Why don't you tell everyone what exactly the Mujin controller is and why it's important?
So basically, like in a Mujin controller, it's like Android and then like an iOS in the cell phone industries. Right now, like industrial robot is actually needed with the highest demand ever. However, industrial robot is very hard to use, right. And then like UI, interface is everything different. Every makers, everything different by every makers. So it's like hard to use, and the robot is not smart. That's why application is limited.
So the Mujin controller is basically an operating system for industrial robots that sits on top of the basic hardware.
Yes.
So it'll run on any manufacturer's robot, theoretically.
Yeah, exactly.
That's fantastic. I can see why that is great for people who want to develop applications for industrial robots or the buyers of industrial robots.
Yeah.
But aren't the manufacturers worried about this? I mean, don't they look at you and say, well, wait a minute, Mujin is doing to us what Microsoft did to PCs. Mm-hmm. They're making it commodity hardware.
Yes, of course, like, everybody worried. And right now, like, we are the only one who get, like, all the confidential information from each makers. However, in the very beginning of the negotiations, it always, like, super difficult. In the very beginning, 2013, there's only one makers, which is DensoWave, gradually, decided, to open up their interface first. But, gradually, the other, robot makers, they start opening.
What was the driver for that? Because there are so many startups who have an idea similar to Mujin, and the idea that they could provide a generic interface.
Yes.
So what was the trigger that made the manufacturers stop resisting and start using the Mujin controller?
Yes. So basically, the uniting an interface is not enough. That's not enough motivation for them to open up their confidential information, right? They try to close their system, their applications, the control language, everything. Like they try to close it, right? And we trying to open it. So this is already like conflict of interest, right? So to make them open their confidential information, we need a killer application, right?
So what was your killer app?
So our killer apps is and it's called the bin picking.
Bin picking.
Yeah, 3D picking, so-called.
Right, and bin picking has been one of the most challenging parts of factory automation for a while because it's... Well, why don't you explain why it's so difficult?
So 3D picking is basically, there are two parts. So one is 3D vision has to detect the parts. And then the robot has to move it, have to take a motion to pick up. So there is a two parts. One is detection, and the other is motions. So for human beings, just pick up from a randomly piled product is super easy.
Right.
It's like a natural. But for the robot, it's super difficult for them to do it.
Because you could have a bin of parts that are all oriented in different directions and...
So let me explain about the robot, how to control the industrial robot. Current way is you have to teach. So usually, if you teach the robot, then a robot will just repeat, how you teach. But bin picking is maybe you can see it. As long as you have very good 3D visions, maybe they can detect the parts. But after they finish detecting the parts, human beings can just pick up as long as you can see. But a robot has to be taught. So you have to remember, robot has to be taught, right? The orientation and the positions, everything is it's almost impossible to think.
Every possible permutation would be overwhelming.
Yes, overwhelming, and it's impossible to teach before, because there is so many possibility of all the motions, right? So Mujin conjure killer application is motion planning. Motion planning is basically a technology which makes a robot think how to move automatically.
So is motion planning more teaching robots to be goal-oriented rather than perform specific motions? Is that fair?
Exactly. With all the technologies, even though you can detect the parts, but you still have to teach. You have to teach all the possible motions by yourself. So it's almost impossible to teach. But with Mujin controllers, robot can be more like human beings. As long as the robot can see some things, then the robot can move. You don't have to teach.
Right. Okay. Well, listen, before we dig into the technology and the competition and the market in general, let's back up a bit and talk about you.
Okay.
You started Mujin back in 2011 with your co-founder, Dr. Rosen Diankov. How did you two meet?
Actually, everybody misunderstood that actually I convinced him to join the Mujin, but this is so wrong.
Okay.
So actually we met in Japan. At the time he was an intern at the Bureau Garage, which is the most famous robot startups. So he was super opposite type of me. It's super different. We are super different, right? So he graduated from UC Berkeley as a top student, and after that he entered the Carnegie Mellon University, where it's the most famous for the robotics.
Yeah.
And then he joined PhD course directly, and then he got PhD when he was 26 years old. And then after that he was doing intern in Intel and then Bureau Garage and Microsoft and those companies. And then at the time the Bureau Garage came to Japan for the exhibition, and then at the time they had a booth, and then within the very smart genius people, there's only one Japanese guy in the Bureau Garage, and that was my mentor in the business, and he was one of the three guys who founded Goldman Sachs Japan before.
All right.
Yeah, so he asked me to help out because I was working in Israeli companies and I was top sales. And then he knew I can speak English and also Chinese, and I know the industries, right? So he asked me to come to help. So Rosen, he was super straightforward guy. Once he believes, he doesn't change. But he somehow believed this is a guy. He tried to convince me let's do some kind of business. But at the time he was from academia, so he doesn't have any sense of the reality.
Right.
I mean, there are so many guys talking about a dream around me at the time. So I was just ignoring him.
So what changed your mind? What convinced you that this was a real business?
So first, before the business, he has to convince me, right? And he was stalking me, for next 1 year, whole 1 year. But every month, every couple of weeks, he sent me the email, the long email, and then I was so busy, so I just replied two sentences. After 10 months or something, he sent me another email, and he said like he's gonna do like in a postdoc job in Tokyo University, so he's coming to Japan. That was in the winter. It's a very cold day, and then he texted me, can I meet you? And I said like, no, I'm pretty busy. I'm actually in Osaka. I'm from Osaka, so I was in parents' house and then relaxing, right? And I cannot. And I replied. And a couple hours later, he sent me the text again. I'm in the Osaka station right now.
Jeez. He came down to Osaka to talk to you.
Yeah. I already told him like I'm already in Osaka, so I cannot give him like a more excuse anymore.
That's you sort of have to meet someone when they go to that extreme.
Yeah,
that's the point where you either have to go and meet them or you have to call the police and say, stay away.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, that was like almost I called the police. Right? We met in a cafe in Osaka stations. He gave me like 2 hours PhD motion planning technology presentations. So I couldn't understand like almost 98%. But 2%, I kind of understood what he has and then what he want to do. But what he has is not product. He only has the technology, potential technology.
Sure.
Right?
And that's hard. I mean, so many startups fail because they just have great technology and no path to market.
Yeah. So I decided to make a team with him, not because like I thought like I can be successful with this guy. I made decisions based on the thought that maybe with this guy, even though we fail, we can do again. We can start again.
VCs often talk about betting on the team, right?
Yeah.
But you were kind of betting on the team when, you were half the team.
Yeah. So it's very Japanese kind of thing, I guess. It's not very logical, right?
No, but it seems to be working out. Okay, so how did you go from there, where you two obviously really believe in each other? What was the path from that to your first customer? Because as you mentioned, this is an incredibly conservative industry.
Yeah. I mean, like, and from here to the first, customers, there was so long, the story. But I will make the long story short.
How long a time period? How long did it take from like, yes, we're going to build this to yes, we've sold this?
So almost 1.5 years. Well,
that's pretty fast.
Oh, sorry. Like the first I decided first customer, still we didn't have the product. So, So after he convinced me, I still don't know like how to use this technology and what's the product, right? So I was start taking him to my customers because I was kind of as a top sales, like I can get into almost any factories around the Aichi, Toyota, and Denso, right? So I was taking him and then asking around the customers what kind of applications they want or what kind of problem they really demand right now. And
so were the Japanese one complaint I hear a lot from Japanese startup founders is that they have a lot of trouble getting feedback and ideas from potential customers. Mm-hmm. So even in this conservative industry, did you find that the clients were willing to give feedback and give ideas early?
Of course, they are very conservative, right? And especially when we talk about something that people never done before, right? So we try to ask robot makers, executives, their opinions. But I'm famous in the metalworking industries, but not in the robotics industries, right? He is very famous in the academia, in the robotics industry, robotics world, but not in the industries. So even if we go to Yaskawa or Fanuc and other companies, they are like, who the hell are you guys, right? Right. So I got one idea. So there's actually their branch in America. Each maker has a branch in America because North America is a big market too. And then the branch managers, they are most a very important person. Always important person go there because it's a big market. But they are relatively much opener than Japan's headquarters.
Okay.
Because they have more the open atmospheres. If there's something the interesting, they can meet. So me and Rosen went to America. And I tried to make the appointment. And actually, I made the appointment with all the presidents in America, the Yaskawa, Kawasaki, Mitsubishi, Nachi Fujikoshi. I made the appointment with the plant manager of the Honda and the Toyota.
Okay, so it was easier to get the appointments in America than in Japan?
Yeah, when you don't have any, the product, yes.
All right.
But so we get like very good idea from this executive, right? They told us like all the current problems, and the second, like, then we hear the good idea, so we will think like how we can solve. And then we came back to Japan. Actually, those like present, like important persons actually communicate with the headquarters. There's some this interesting guy. And then when we went back to Japan, like some of the robot makers actually invited us for the presentation, right?
All right.
And then like one of the robot makers actually offered us to have the booth inside of their booth in the international robot exhibitions. That was 2009.
And that was before you even had a product.
At the time, I didn't have a product. We only had some kind of the only open rave.
So in the booth, what were you advertising in the booth? Just we exist?
Yeah, I mean, good example. A good question. We didn't even have a company name because at the time I'm still working as the sales engineer in ISCAR, and he is working as the postdoc in Tokyo universities. We didn't even have a company. So when we exhibit something in a booth, international in the robot exhibitions, we have to have like at least the company name, right?
It's useful, yes.
It's useful. So before this, when we introduce, it's like Issei and Rosen. That's it. It's very kind of shady. Yeah. So at the time, like we decided to call them Mujin, and then we made only one interface. But none of us is UI engineers, so it was very kind of mock-up and the kind of shitty stuff.
Right.
Only 3 buttons was actually working. But this is a secret. But
3 buttons out of how many?
30 or something. Like there are many parameters, stuff, but didn't work. And somehow like we exhibit, and actually we exhibited robot motion optimization simulators. Then actually some of the companies, so like they send us like so much interest, and the Canon was like become like first customers. They knew like we are still startups and we didn't have nothing, but they offer like to do some little project. So that was like our beginning.
All right. So with Canon, it was like a experimental project or like a joint development type of a project?
Yes. As you know, Canon was making like a camera, right?
Right.
Actually, they automate like 95%.
Oh, wow.
So it's like the highest automation rate in Japan for the camera.
Well, yeah, and we were talking before, and you mentioned that the rate of factory automation is actually a whole lot lower than most people think.
Yeah.
So, for example, with automobiles, what percentage of automobile production is really done by robots?
Of course, it's going to be different. Depends on like automakers, but like around the 5%. Only 5% is automated by the robot.
Okay. And so Canon was automating at 95%.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a different product, of course.
Yeah,
but
different product,
that's,
but still.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Like the one problem they had is like if you automate 95%, means the 60 robot was working in one line to make one camera, right? Each robot motions, cycle time actually like influence the production so much. So if 5% of the production rate increase, that's gonna like give them like so much of the benefit, right?
Right. Oh, so this gets into what you're saying about Mujin's core advantage, where it can sort of, since it's goal-oriented, it can sort of optimize the motions on its own.
Exactly. So our controllers can think all the like possible motions in very short times. Then like we can optimize the motion. Then like we can shorten the cycle time. If we can shorten like 1 second out of 5 seconds, they are like...
That's a 20% increase.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Yeah. So Canon operator, they are spending their lifetime to think how to shorten the cycle time 0.5 seconds every day, seriously.
Has that project moved from a pilot stage, and are they actually using it in their factories today?
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, actually, another one of your projects that I thought was amazing was the project with JD in China. It's the first fully automated logistics warehouse.
Yeah.
And the video is amazing to watch. But can you talk about that a bit?
Yeah, of course. Like, so the Canon stuff I was talking like so far was it's a little different. Current way of the people is teaching like, let's say 1,000 motion, 2,000 motion by hand. It's hell. And then with our controllers, maybe like, they don't have to teach anymore. So, it's going to be much, much easier. However, people can still do the demo if they take the time, 1 year. If they wanna have a time, then they still can do it.
Well, yeah, that's the big problem with robotics demos and artificial intelligence demos. And
yeah. So I was keep thinking, what was the ultimate application that only we can do? I realized that's the logistics. So you remember, even one metal part, we have to teach 2,000, 3,000 motions by hand. But if you go to logistics, there are so many kinds of the workplaces coming every day, right?
And what they're picking they're not even picking the same thing every time.
Yeah, 40,000, 50,000, sometimes 100,000 in the workplaces. And then guess what? 200 new workplaces is coming every day. Who's gonna teach?
Not possible.
It's not possible. That's why you never seen the robot in a warehouse before. We actually tried to apply, our technology to the logistics application, the fulfillment, piece picking application, and somehow it worked out.
Somehow.
Yeah.
That's great. So Mujin's actually very aggressive in international expansion as well. And I find it interesting that a lot of startups coming out of Silicon Valley kind of wave their flag and say, we're San Francisco startups, and it gives them kind of this credibility. As a Japan startup, does that help you? Does that hurt you?
It actually helps.
Yeah?
Yeah. Before we did the Chinese project, we had a Japanese project, right? So there's, I guess, 3 advantages that we had, as a Japanese startups. So one is we are in a target-rich environment.
What do you mean?
Target-rich environment?
Yeah.
Means so once you go out, Tokyo, then you see so many factories, so many kinds of companies. So it's not even only Sony, Panasonic. There's so many Indian and Fanac, right? So we are Japanese people living in very small countries, but manufacturing companies' density is, I guess, the highest here.
Okay, interesting.
Once you walk around, you hit somebody. And also we can see so many different kind of the industries. Even in the manufacturing, there's so many industry too, right? So many kinds of the manufacturing. And we can experience so many the different manufacturing at the same time. So this is one thing. If you go to Americas, there's not much manufacturing. This is A, B. So manufacturing company, they are not sticking each other, right? You see the one big factory outside the Los Angeles, but next big factory is maybe 200 kilometers away.
That's true. Japan, it's got a bigger density of them.
Yeah, bigger density. So this is one thing. So second thing is Japan is not very famous for IT. However, for the manufacturing, we still have some respect, in the world as a manufacturing. Right?
So when you went overseas, was the fact that you were a Japanese company helpful, or was the fact that you had Japanese manufacturing customers, did that carry weight?
Yeah, I mean Japanese manufacturing companies, we are super sensitive for the safetyness and the stabilities, and also manufacturing qualities. And those stuff is so crazy, right? So strict in Japan. Even I was making a GM, the Ford, those parts with the Honda, Toyota, even 1 gears, the precision, everything is so different. People in the world, they think, if our product work in the manufacturing company in Japan, it means we already passed so many tests already. It's over quality already, right? We don't even have to test outside.
So the Japanese customer base is just invaluable for it.
Yeah. And the third thing is customers' feedback. This is a really, really Japanese thing. But the field workers, how they feel that their responsibility is very strong. Regardless of their salaries, once they take the job, they will feel so much responsibilities. So once we give them our product and they test it, right? Of course, there are so many bugs. In the very beginning,
there always is. That's fine.
There are many. I guarantee. Not everybody, but if I ask the customer in America or some other regions, they just tell us they couldn't do it, and then I tell them so how?
This is really interesting because With most software startups, I hear the opposite story. I hear that American customers provide lots of feedback and lots of advice, where Japanese customers tend to be more demanding and have higher levels of support. So is there something different about the robotics industry?
Yeah, I mean, especially in the manufacturing or like those heavy industries, right? Japan's like field workers are very responsible. I think in the opposite from IT, the world. If you, ask the field workers in, for example, like Ford, right? They are like chewing the gum and like drinking the coffee, and they are like assembling stuff, right? And they are testing our product, and I ask them why. So how's my product? Oh, it couldn't work out. It didn't go well. And then so what kind of like situations it didn't go out? I asked them. They just tell us like that's your job to solve, to find. So, but in Japan, other Japanese peoples, there is some kind of gemba. Gemba is like the field, real field. They have pride. As long as they need to complain someone, they have to clarify why they are complaining. So they prepare for everything. Like so, in these situations, they always
document everything.
Document everything.
Do you think part of that might be that the American factory workers view automation as more of a threat than the Japanese workers do? Are they maybe like afraid for their jobs or something?
Oh yeah, I mean that one too. That was second reason. Japan nationality is very open for the robot. The US, even in Europe, they have a very strong Hollywood influence. So they
the Terminator?
Yeah.
Where Japan is more Doraemon.
Yeah. So they have like a negative impression for the robot. They think the robot is friendly in the very beginning. They think so in the end, the robot maybe coming to fight against you guys.
Actually, that's true. It's not just about like being afraid of their job. It is this overall cultural idea that in America, in movies, the robot's almost always the bad guy.
Yeah.
And in Japanese movies, it's almost always the good guy.
Yeah, always good guy. Doraemon's Atom, even the Mechagodzilla.
Yeah.
Gundam stuff, always like human side. I mean, this is a very interesting story. So I go to the factory, right? In order to automate, some of the tasks, I had to ask field workers, that working that task, right? So I came for the automations, and then, can you tell me how you do it? Can you show me? And then they don't have any hesitations. They are like, this much, and then this is the difficult part, and then you should do this. But if I do this same stuff in America, maybe I have to be so much careful, not to get stabbed, from the back.
How much of that do you think is this cultural like or dislike for robots, and how much of that do you think is the fact that Japanese companies don't fire staff very easily, and the US companies will lay off staff fast? So how much of it is just liking or disliking robots, and how much do you think is people are legitimately worried about robots taking their jobs?
There are so much cultural things, I guess, more than the general impression of the robot. In Japanese cultures, we have some kind of a beauty that all the employee is a family. Once we hire somebody, we shouldn't easily lay off people, because they are family. They are not employees. So this is a Japanese beauty. It's like samurai stuff.
Yeah.
Samurai is once you hire somebody, they are not just employees. They are one of the families. So it means we cannot fire people. Otherwise, everybody thinks, oh, you are not a good leader.
Right.
In the US, maybe as long as it's logical, you lay off the people, sometimes you become a good leader. But in Japan, it's not. We have a very limited choice, actually. We cannot lay off people. So we have to increase efficiency and the productivity with the same amount of the people, because I don't want to hire the more people.
Well, and right now in Japan, there's a real labor shortage.
Yeah.
So automation is absolutely necessary.
Yeah, social background is actually pushing up our demand.
Yeah.
Originally, Japanese people, we had a good impression of the robot, and also we know our resources are always limited. That's why, we knew, automations is absolutely necessary for the growth for Japan. So once we automate something, we can make one thing cheaper and the quality become more stable. Everything is going to be so precise. If you get good stuff with a cheaper price, of course the product can be sold more. Right. Then Toyota, everybody have to make another factories. Then we have to hire more. So we knew as a cultures, as in our experience, we know automation actually produce more employment. That's how we won in last 40 years.
And do you think that this type of automation is the solution going forward as Japan has a smaller and smaller population?
Yes.
Yeah, other than huge amounts of immigration, automation's about the only path forward.
Yeah.
But Japan also has a huge number of very tiny factories.
Yeah.
And most of these factories are not automated. They're people doing the work by hand. And robots themselves aren't expensive. An industrial robot might cost a few million yen and last for 20 or 30 years or even longer.
Yeah.
Is the reason that these small factories aren't automated just the cost of teaching and training the robots?
Yeah, I mean, the cost of the teaching is a lot. That's the one thing. But more teaching is very difficult. It's not something anybody can teach. How you do it is you have some kind of it's called pendant, which has a flow of the text, and the flow of the text, and you have to imagine how the robot moves in 3D in your head. It's super difficult. It's almost impossible.
It sounds a lot like computer programming back when you had to use punch cards.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, how we program the robot hasn't been changed the last 40 years.
Do you think that either using Mujin technology or other companies' technology, we're going to get robots to a point where a small factory run by 5 or 10 people will be able to train their own robots?
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. That's the final goal. But right now, in even big companies, still difficult for the automation, even though they have money. So we have to automate those big companies which has so much resources. They are first. And then, we go into the smaller market.
All right.
Yeah.
You mentioned before one of the unique things about Mujin is because of you and the co-founder, you really have a multinational team.
Yeah.
So about what's the ratio between Japanese staff and foreign staff at Mujin?
Yeah. So right now, our company has 70 employees right now. 80% is engineer background people. 60% came from all over the world. So basically not Japanese.
Okay. How do you handle communication? And do you have advice for other startups with mixed teams on making sure communication is effective and everyone knows what they're supposed to be doing?
Yeah, basically you have to speak English. This is one thing. This is one high hurdle that you have to overcome in Japan. But our company's common language is absolutely English. So if you don't speak English, you are not hired.
Do your sales staff speak English at internal sales meetings?
As a internal sales meeting, we speak whatever language. The most of the time maybe Japanese. But once we get a project, we have to talk to project managers, and also we have to talk to engineers. Then we of course speak English. But eventually, when we grow the company more than 100 people, I cannot require all the English to all the employees maybe. But for now, everybody have to speak.
Okay.
Yeah.
Before we wrap up, let me ask you what I call my magic wand question. And that is, if I gave you a magic wand and I told you that you could change one thing about Japan, anything at all, the education system, the way people think about risk, their attitude towards robotics, anything at all to make things better for startups and innovation in Japan, what would you change?
Education.
Education?
Yeah.
What would you change about it?
So especially the university educations, I think that's necessary to be improved.
How would you improve it?
Compared to America or Europe, Japanese the university education It's like when they enter the university, I'm pretty sure like Japanese level is very high. But like when they graduate, for some reason, they are not like as hungry as other countries, and also they are not smart.
Well, there is that reputation that American universities are easy to get into and hard to graduate, and Japanese universities are really hard to get into, but once you do, it's easy to graduate.
Yeah, basically it's like that. It's not really like true for the American university.
Yeah.
It's just like a Japanese universities, like they only see the test in a one-time test, right? And once they pass the test, they enter the good university, and that's their goal of their life.
And they have 4 years to just kind of enjoy themselves before real life starts.
Yeah. US part is like, so university, they see like whole years of high schools, like a GPA and the activity and everything, right? Japanese only see the test, one-time test, and that's everything. And then like a name is very important. So if you have Tokyo University or the Keio University, then like it's almost like your job is decided.
So what should they be doing? Should they just be studying their subjects much harder? Should they be trying to collaborate with different departments? Ideally, what kind of curriculum or activity should they be doing in Japan?
Yeah, so there are two things I think. So one thing is like the university have to see like a whole activities, like a whole how they lived when they are in the high school. Second thing is like curriculum, and also like they have to teach critical thinking in Japan. Because Japan's beauty is whatever you are taught, and you shouldn't have questions. This is like there is some kind of weird notion in the bottom of our cultures. For example, when you have a lecture in the university, and then teachers ask you in the very last, do you have any questions? Japanese students barely raise their hand. Even one person raise their hand, that's a lot today. But if you do it in America, everybody raise their hand, right?
So are they afraid to show that they don't understand the subject, or they just think it's not necessary to understand it more deeply?
I mean, they don't think, they never doubt their thought is right or not.
Okay. Their job is just accepting information and learning the one right answer.
Yeah, how to obey, how to carry out, your mission is it's samurai. It's very important. We don't really doubt whatever we are given.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think university would be a good place to kind of break that idea that there's always one right answer, and your job is just to find it.
Yeah, it's like I'm not asking your questions, right? I'm not asking your opinions. Just do whatever I said. That's what Japanese is. It's more like military stuff.
Right. Yeah.
But there's a good point and bad point. So good point is once someone say really good things, everybody can go into one direction without any questions. So it's very quick. Once the direction is right, then we can actually work very efficiently.
Yeah, it's incredibly efficient if you know exactly where you want to go.
Yeah.
But I guess in Japan the problem is we're not sure where we want to go right now.
Yeah, but still there is the beauty. Everybody follow the rule, right? So this is a good part. But in the educations, for the innovations, that's not a good part. Programming, software engineering, those one we have to do critical things all the time. You shouldn't have common sense. But Japanese education, we teach have a common sense. So this is very different.
Right. Do you think that's changing now?
It's relatively changing now, but still very slow. But we start having success stories around the universities, right?
Well, the University of Tokyo has produced a huge number of startups in the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
So at least some people are changing the way they're thinking.
Yeah, but still in Tokyo University, and then I think second was Keio or Waseda, right? But difference between Tokyo and then under second is so huge still.
Really?
Yeah. And also a difference is Tokyo University student, well somehow they are studying. The other the students, they are playing around. So third thing is if I say curriculum has to be harder. They have to take attendance too. In America, our attendance is taken, and also curriculum is really hard. They don't have mercy if you are like under the line.
American professors will fail you without hesitation.
Yeah, without hesitation. They are like a really nice person, right? Hey, it's okay. Study is not only your life. Bye, right? But Japan has like, oh, you are like the F plus. But teacher, like, I didn't my best. Or maybe then like a C plus, blah blah blah. This is really bad.
Yeah, it's not good preparation for life, is it?
Yeah. So university is actually valued that how much like graduate students is contributing to society, right? Japanese people, when they enter the university, they have so much abilities, but like within the 4 years, they are spoiled. And also like when they graduate, they don't have much power to fight against the smart people outside of Japan.
We need to keep that momentum going from high school, which is really hard, and just keep that momentum all through university.
Yeah, that's the difference. Like, we really have to like change education. Education seems to be like long run like project, but actually like the shortest way to power up the country
is fixing the universities.
Yeah, that's why like most of the people who did the really good startups is either Tokyo University or has experience going to outside Japan.
All right. Well, listen, Issei, thank you so much for sitting down with me. I really appreciate it.
Is it okay? Like, I didn't even talk about like a JD and stuff.
And we're back. Issei's story about how he worked to find his early adopters is interesting. Although Mujin was a Japanese startup trying to sell its innovations to Japanese companies, he had to go to America and talk to the American subsidiaries. Now, some of this can be explained by the fact that it's easier to get appointments at smaller offices rather than headquarters, but that's not all of it. In fact, there's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy at work here. Japanese enterprises believe that American companies are more innovative, and they very often overlook the innovation that is happening right here in Japan. It's a very similar sentiment to what Takumo Iwasa of Cerevo told us last year, that even though most of his customers were in Japan, he only exhibited his products at international expos because the Japanese press paid far more attention to them. In any event, Mujin's customers knew a good thing when they saw it, and being a Japanese startup, or at least having Japanese industrial customers, is now working to their advantage, where companies worldwide assume that if Mujin can meet the demanding requirements of Japanese firms, Mujin will be able to meet theirs as well. And although we didn't really dive into it that deeply, getting an industry to move from their proprietary software and standardize on your platform is something that many startups dream about doing, but it is profoundly difficult to pull off in practice. The fact that Mujin has convinced so many of the big robotics manufacturers to do so is proof that their product is a huge leap forward. You are going to hear a lot about Mujin in the future. They're doing something that no one else in the world is able to do, and they're just starting to go global. If you've got thoughts on robotics and automation, Issei and I would love to hear from you. So come by disruptingjapan.com/show125 and tell us about it. And hey, please also follow Disrupting Japan on Twitter and Facebook, or even join our LinkedIn group. If you want to ask a question there, I guarantee you I'll respond. But most of all, thanks for listening. And thank you for letting people interested in Japanese startups know about the show. I'm Tim Romero, and thanks for listening to Disrupting Japan.